and welcome to Perspective. I am JAWAD. The humanitarian crisis in the war-torn Afghanistan is getting deeper with each passing day. And after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, the US froze its foreign assets that were worth $9.5 billion. And also, owing to the disengagement of the other Western allies, the aid on which the economy of Afghanistan depended was also halted. Ever since then, Pakistan has been at the forefront in highlighting this issue and urging the international community to do something substantial in order to avert the humanitarian and economic crisis in Afghanistan. And Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, in his latest tweet, has reminded the world that providing immediate relief to impoverished Afghanistan was also obligatory under the unanimously adopted UN principle of responsibility to protect. Now, in a latest development, a 15-member Taliban delegation is in Norway's capital, Oslo, and they are expected to hold discussions not only with the Norwegian authorities, but as well as with the European Union officials. They are also expected to meet the representatives from the UK, the US, France, Germany, Italy, besides some of the civil society members from Afghanistan as well. On the other hand, the opposition group in Afghanistan, the National Resistance Front, and some civil society members have opposed this initiative by Norway. However, the Norwegian foreign minister says that these meetings do not represent a legitimization of recognition of the Taliban, but we must talk to the de facto authorities in the country. We cannot allow the political situation to lead to an even worse humanitarian disaster. What could be expected out of these talks? This is the first official engagement by the Taliban with any Western power. And to discuss this, I am joined today at Perspective by Dr. Nazir Mahmood, a foreign affairs expert, and Mr. Yasir Janjua, who is a defense analyst. Both of them are joining me in the studio. And Ms. Sumaira Khan, a journalist, would be joining me on Skype. First of all, I'll start the discussion with you. Sumaira, you had been on the ground in Afghanistan, especially in those days when the Taliban were taking one province after the other, and finally they reached at the gates of Kabul. So we saw there were voices being raised specifically by Pakistan that there could be an economic and humanitarian crisis, and that is exactly what we see on the ground. What are the latest updates do you have from that war-torn country right now?
Yes, indeed, Jawad. Thank you very much first of all, thank you very much for inviting me on this very important and I would term it a vital sort of discussion regarding Afghanistan. Yes, we remember that I used to speak to you even from Afghanistan, and I used to tell you and every media personnel who were asking me question that what is on ground situation in Afghanistan right now, and my response to all those queries would be that a fast humanitarian crisis is approaching Afghanistan. And if we don't do anything right now, and by saying we, I would always term back, even back then, I would always term the international community. That if we don't step forward, if we don't act fast, this fast approaching humanitarian crisis would be first man-made crisis in the history, in the what should we call it, in the terms of humanitarian crisis and any kind of disaster for any country. And it is
So,
happening
Sumaira,
now.
that is
It
exactly what
happened.
we are seeing on the ground right now. So how are the Afghans coping up with this current situation?
They are left with no options, Jawad. We have been discussing this winter. We have been discussing this harshest weather in Afghanistan. And I must tell you that wars in Afghanistan were always planned in accordance with when the winter is approaching. Because even the international forces were not able to cope up with this harsh weather of Afghanistan, for which this critical land is known for. Because there is a very famous saying in Pashto and Dari and Farsi, regarding Afghanistan, whenever you discuss it, there is a saying that if you want to die in Afghanistan fighting, you must, if you don't want to die in Afghanistan fighting, then you have to avoid winters in Afghanistan. So right now, people
That's
are
a very
helpless.
important, that's
People
very
are
important point.
faced
Sumaira, I'll come back to you with
complexities.
certain other things to discuss. I'll take this very point to other participants of the show. Dr. Nazir, as Sumaira has just mentioned, she had been continuously updating regarding the situation that was unfolding in Afghanistan. Now we see exactly that humanitarian crisis and the economic crisis the Afghans are faced with. And winter has finally come. That is exactly what Prime Minister Imran Khan in his latest tweets has alluded to as well. What do you think? What could be transpired in these talks between the Taliban and the Norwegian officials that have kicked off today, specifically when we consider this is the first international engagement by the Taliban?
Well, we can look at in both positive and negative ways. First, let's talk about what positive may come out of it. The positive sign is that for the first time, Europe, a country from Europe has taken an initiative and invited them. In fact, Norway sent their own plane to pick 15-member delegation of the Afghan Taliban, which is a positive sign. After 6 months, this is first direct engagement of a European country. And not only Norway, but as you just mentioned that, the major powers that will be talking to the Taliban delegation, they include 3 veto powers, permanent members of the Security Council, USA, France and UK. And in addition to that, there is also Italy and Germany and other civil society organizations. So I think looking at it positively, this is a positive sign. Europe has given a positive signal by inviting, sending and negotiating with them. The negative side that is there, I think Taliban have not learned anything, because they have sent 15-member delegation, all male members, not even a single woman. If they are in such a crisis and the world community is demanding that the government should be more inclusive, they should have more women. 40 million people are at stake. 40 million is the population, nearly 40 million of Afghanistan, and half of them are women. They could not find a single 1 or 2 women just to be with them, to go there and talk to them. That could have sent a positive signal. That they didn't do. And secondly, the inclusive government also that they were supposed to form, they have been unable. So it is wrong to just blame the international community. I think Taliban are also in the wrong side.
So, Mr. Janjua, what do you say about this, as Dr. Nazir has just alluded to the fact that this 15-member delegation of Taliban doesn't have even a single female, and they don't represent the entire spectrum of Afghanistan's ethnicity?
With due apologies to Dr. I don't particularly agree with the notion that the Taliban should appease the world community. They've never done that. This time round, when they were coming to power, they gave signals, yes, we would not be the Taliban of 90s. However, if we expect them to change overnight and become inclusive by asking the women to participate in the government, that's not going to happen overnight. We should take baby steps with them and let them also, we also let them get into the shoes and then let them get settled down, rather than expecting a little too much from them, what they have not been accustomed to. I don't particularly think that this should be the bone of contention, that if they have not included women in their government or not taken the women in the delegation, this should not. The first and foremost thing is, it's their money which the Americans have frozen. And now we are talking about United Nations asking $5 billion in aid. Why can't the Americans release their money? It's money that belongs to the people of Afghanistan, not Taliban. And the people of Afghanistan are serving. And we all must know that why the Americans and the NATO forces went into Afghanistan. They did not go into Afghanistan 20 years ago for any humanitarian reasons. We all know why did they go there. They had their vested interests, and when they couldn't fulfill, they had to lose miserably and then leave the country. When you've left the country and when you left the Afghans to their own fate, Why are you keeping their money? So this is very barbaric, as a matter of fact.
Mr. Janjua, the Afghan economy during the past two governments, during Ashraf Ghani's government and Hamid Karzai's government, it was dependent mostly on the foreign aid, and around 75 to 80% of Afghan economy was run on the foreign aid. So what makes you say that the accounts which are frozen in the US that is worth $9.5 billion are actually Afghanistan's money?
They are Afghan money because somebody gave the aid to them in those times. Now they belong to Afghanistan. Now once you give me an aid and then you ask me, no, you can't use that aid, so now it is technically their money. As a matter of fact, if you don't give them the money, this is a $500 million a year revenue stream from the drugs trade that is going to start again. So you want them to do that? That's not fair. The fact is, we must, as a community, as a world community, and Prime Minister Imran Khan has been very spot on when he's been talking about this single-handedly, that this is a crisis that is looming, and we must address it by giving them the aid.
Okay, I'll take this point to Ms. Sumera. Sumera, when we talk about the lack of resources currently in Afghanistan, that happens to be a very critical issue for the Afghans, as well as we know that 75 to 80% of foreign aid was used for the public spending in Afghanistan in the last two governments of Ashraf Ghani and Hamid Karzai. Now, what basically are those resources that Afghan Taliban actually can rely on if the international community doesn't come to help it, or the Afghans, in fact, what could those alternate resources of generating revenue could be at the hands of the Taliban?
Jawad, we need to stand very clear on one point, that Afghanistan was totally dependent on, or mostly dependent on foreign aid. Yes, foreign aid was there, and for that matter, I would refer to Afghanistan papers recently have been released by SIGAR in this regard, and they are eye-opening. But for once, I will try to clarify it for all those who are listening, those who are watching, and those who are every one of us almost. Afghanistan is a landlocked country. It has no access to sea directly, no access to seaports directly. But it had one access that was through Nimroz Zaranj dry port, Aslam Kala, we call it Aslam Kala, and it is still producing, it is still earning $22 million a month due to that trade ongoings with Iran. Same goes for Pakistan and other immediate neighbors of Afghanistan. Afghanistan has one single potential, and that is transit. And it is extracting each and every bit of that transit potential to on its own right now. Yes, their central banking system stands collapsed right now. That is why other countries are unable to send their exports to Afghanistan. But it doesn't mean that Afghanistan has stopped sending its export to other countries, and they are earning a big time on while depending on those land trade routings with other countries. Pakistan has 5 trade crossings into Afghanistan, and they are Kharlachi, Torkham, Chaman, Angurada and Ghulam Khan. They are very much active. So we can't say that they have lack of resources. They don't have any such thing. They have money, but they are only lacking one thing, and that is their central banking system, which is collapsed. They are unable to transact anything. They are unable to pay for things. They are unable to pay salaries. They are unable to, like, in short, they have no vital system that can introduce them to the world out there. But once again, I would like to clarify it for the viewers and listeners
So,
that they are not short of money. They're only short of a mechanism that they can take in place, and they can get their connectivity restored with the world out there. So this
So
is
it's
one thing.
not the
And
shortage
second
of
thing, yes,
resources, but
Taliban
actually the
needs
central
technical
banking system,
assistance
you are
too.
of the view, has collapsed, and that needs to be revived. Do you think the purpose of this visit of the Taliban delegation to Norway could be to get that one revived?
I'm very sure, and I will give Pakistan full credit for this, because Pakistan had been day in and day out. Pakistan had been rendering all its diplomatic efforts to kind of restore, if not de jure, because no country is right now in a position to give them de jure recognition. But yes, de facto recognition is there. And this is one thing I've been speaking about when I was in Kabul 5 months back, that world needs at least 6 months span of time. And now, Jawad, you are seeing it happening. So Pakistan had been tirelessly working in regards to connect this de facto government of Afghanistan to the world out there, because there is no other option even for us, because then we are the neighbor who's sharing 2,600 kilometers long, vital but a very complicated border with Afghanistan, and we are the one who will be facing the influx and the fallback. And you can easily imagine, and you can easily presume that what Pakistan would be if world doesn't come up with the help, immediate help for Afghan. So that is why Pakistan is rendering all its efforts, and Norway is that one step that after OIC, what Pakistan committed and Pakistan sought from the international community, that if you don't engage them, it is going to be the onus on world. So I would declare it, I would term it a fruit of that extraordinary session of OIC that Pakistan hosted for Afghans. And after this, we'll see more, because there is a hidden liaison between Afghans, the de facto government of Afghan Taliban, and
Okay,
few of the
Sumaira,
other
your point is
countries.
well taken. I'll move to Dr. Nazir. Dr. Nazir, as Sumaira has comprehensively elaborated that she thinks that there is no lack of resources in Afghanistan. It's only the central banking system that has collapsed. Now, doesn't it raise a question on the capacity and the capability of Afghan Taliban? Because they were very much eager to take over one province after the other, and they went to Kabul as well. Now they have captured entire Afghanistan, but they had no preparation at hand before taking over Afghanistan.
Serious issue of competency is there, of course. And it's like, you occupy a factory and then you try to impose your own will, experts leave, you can't run the factory, and then you ask the same experts to come and help. It doesn't happen. If you don't have properly qualified people to run the country, look at the leadership. Mullah Akhundzadeh, Mullah brother, Mullah Muttaqi, all these mostly are seminary people. These 15 people are also who are representing there. You cannot find hardly a single expert. This is not a question of appeasement, as my fellow speaker has just mentioned. Appeasing Taliban probably is what is costing the people of Afghanistan, because when you take over a country, you should have the capacity to run the country, and this crisis is not unforeseen. Who are just pretending that we didn't know that would happen. I mean, there were people who were writing constantly in the newspaper that if that happens, that will be a disaster. And you very rightly pointed out that 70 to 80% of their budget was coming from foreign aid. That was the money, and these are the same countries which are now talking to these people. America has also announced aid. They have announced, initially they announced $450 million, then they announced $308 million. So the aid is coming, but this is bare minimum humanitarian aid that will only help to ensure some food security.
I'll come back to this very point. And
just one last point that I will make before I conclude was that, Taliban were expecting that there will be rapid recognition from other countries. They travel to Russia, no recognition. They travel to China, no recognition. They travel to Qatar, no recognition. They travel to Turkmenistan, no recognition. Travel to Pakistan, no recognition. This is their 6th visit. What that shows? That shows that the international community, the world community, including Russia and China and Iran, all of them are reluctant, and there are solid reasons for that.
Okay, Dr. Nazir, I've taken your point well, and now I'm joined by Brigadier Retired Shahid Jagir, who is a defense analyst. Thank you for your time. Brigadier Jagir, we've been discussing, and Sumaira Khan, correspondent who had been covering the situation in Afghanistan on ground since a long time, especially when the Taliban took over Kabul. She's of the view that Afghanistan doesn't lack resources. It's about the collapse of the central banking system that must be revived in order to avert the humanitarian crisis. And that is exactly the purpose of their visit to Oslo as well. What do you think?
Thank you very much for inviting me on this program. Well, I have a different view. Afghanistan has been used as a firing range for the last 40 years, as I always used to say, where all the infrastructure, all the banking system, and everything that a country needs to run, the organs of the country which needs to be run, it has been destroyed completely. And the previous Afghan rulers, as you have said, that they have been getting the aid from US and the NATO and ISF was running the show. That is the main reason that the country has been totally destroyed. Destroyed not in the sense that their infrastructure is destroyed, but destroyed in the sense that all organs of the state have been disrupted. Yes, Afghan warlords do have the money, but it is the people, common people of Afghanistan which are suffering. And that is what the UN Secretary General has also said a few days back, that we should not give the collective punishment to the Afghan people because of the de facto rulers do not come to terms with the big powers. Now that is what is the actual fact on the ground is. Now coming on to the Oslo talks, I think in my point of view, it's a good omen to see the Americans, UK, European Union representatives and the Afghan diaspora which is there in the Europe, talking to them, Afghan people, Afghan representatives, and understanding their issue. Now, as the Jua Sahab has very rightly said, that Afghanistan has a culture. You cannot, and the Prime Minister has also, over a period of time, has talked about this, that you understand the Afghan culture, Afghan norms. You cannot have the human rights and girls' liberty as you have in Europe, as you have in Scandinavian countries, as you have in US, because their culture is different. Afghan culture is different, and to change a culture, it takes time. That's why it is said by the thinkers that give the time to the Afghan present government. It is how much time has passed. That is the point to note. The 40 years war they have fought, and it was nothing but the firing between the world's most powerful countries and the Taliban.
Brigadier your point is well taken. You're of the view, as Mr. Janjua alluded to the fact that Afghan culture is very different, and it will definitely take some time for the things to get back on track, or those demands which the Western countries have laid forth in order to meet them. As you mentioned, a couple of reasons why the organs in Afghanistan had gone dysfunctional. You're of the view it was basically because of the foreign funding. But at the same time, during the previous governments, the corruption was rampant. It was also highlighted by the Americans themselves. Do you think that corruption also led to the dysfunction of those institutions in Afghanistan? And was there any other reason? And the Taliban are not solely to blame for the humanitarian crisis that is there.
No. Look, you have to see it in the multiple dimensions. Corruption by the previous government was one factor. The other factor has been that the people of Afghanistan never wanted these rulers to be on them. They divided the Afghanistan into power lords, and they were not representing all the factions of the Afghan. One. Second, the ISF has been empowering the people, those who have been helping them. And they have also now been left high and dry. Third thing was that since It was there was no development work there. The government slowly and gradually, the organs of the state got weakened and then come to a ventilator now. That is why all these factors have contributed to the present state of the Afghan situation.
Mr. Janju, as
You
Brigadier
see,
Jagir
in the
has
world
alluded to a
history,
number of points that
it
have
is,
actually contributed to
it
this
is,
humanitarian
it is,
crisis over there in
it's
Afghanistan.
an
What do you
example.
say about that?
See, I tend to agree. I'd pick up upon Dr. Naz's statement. Yes, there's a serious lack of capacity in the Afghan government, in the Taliban government, and this is one of the reasons the international community is not really ready to trust them, whether they can run the country or not. However, see, until 1953, women and the blacks were not allowed to sit on the front seats of the buses in America. They were not allowed to vote. And in 6 months' time, the Americans want the Afghans to change all of a sudden. I was a few days ago speaking to an officer who has been there in the Pakistani mission in Kabul for a very long time. Unfortunately, I can't give names because of certain reasons. And he very rightly pointed out, he says, most of the people in Pakistan and especially in the West do not understand the Afghan culture. It is so complex because of their ethnicities. Now the problems are, as you said, first and foremost, the capacity. The second thing is their culture. And the third and the most important thing right now, which is biting them so badly, is the resources, the finances. It's the money that makes the mayor go everywhere. Without money, and if you don't give them the money, in a few months' time, that $500 million economy that I was talking about, the opium, that trade is going to start again. Although Pakistan has tried to plug those gaps by fencing the border, but then they'll find out a way to take that to the West. Now, we as a world community have to realize we can't just put them to starvation just like that. Just because a representative government that we like has not been installed in Afghanistan, we should stop giving them the money they need. They're giving money to everybody. So why the Afghans? The question is, when we say, especially we the Pakistanis say, that the Kashmiris should be allowed to have a right to self-determination, the Palestinians should be allowed to have the right to self-determination. Now when the Afghans say, whether we like it or not, if they have chosen the Taliban or if they have succumbed, or the entire Afghan nation has succumbed to the Taliban pressure, we tried to enforce that for the last 20 years. The world failed. They could not defeat them. And Afghans have never been defeated there. Many, many countries and nations in last centuries have tried that. And they have not been able to do it. You can't just bulldoze into the Afghan culture. We have to be very careful. The disaster is going to be much bigger than what we are trying to achieve. If we think we can dictate them and we can let them do the things our way, that's not going to happen. We have to be very careful with them and go slow.
Okay, coming back to the Oslo talks, Sumera, what do you think? Is there any major breakthrough that is expected out of these talks? Because the Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid, in a statement before heading towards Oslo, has said that the Taliban have made some progress in order to meet the demands from the Western world.
I think it will take them a lot of time. Initially, I thought it's going to be 6 months' time, but probably up to a year. I can safely say that there would be different missions working in Afghanistan. You can mark my words. Why I'm saying that? Because right now we have Saudi KSA's mission. They sent probably around 24th November or 22nd November. They sent a 14-member diplomatic mission to Afghanistan, and we know if KSA is sending their diplomatic mission to a country they did not even recognize yet. So it means a lot. It means a lot for the international community as well, because KSA does not leave that ground be blank for other key regional players in Afghanistan, since Qatar has an eminent presence in Afghanistan, and we have seen how and to what larger extent Qatar has been helping the Afghan Taliban starting from their political office in Doha till now. They have spent a lot. They had been a major part of the evacuation operation from Afghanistan to other countries. They fed hundreds and thousands of Afghans in Doha while keeping them on different
But
military bases.
Sumaira, the
Until
situation,
now,
the
they are trying
scenario
to
at that very
disperse.
time was entirely different from that what happens to be now. Now they have set an interim government over there in Afghanistan. They have captured Afghanistan. But before that, they were working as a resistance group, and they resorted to all sort of tactics in order to be at the upper hand on the negotiating table. Don't you think that they have to make more compromises this time around, and they can't act with a position of strength in these negotiations as they had the negotiations that led to the signing of historic Doha peace deal?
See, they are already open to all kinds of offers they have right now on their table. For example, they agreed to, yes, they are going to give share to women, and eventually they have to. If they don't, they have no idea what kind of resistance they are going to face even from Pakistan. In the past, in the history, Pakistan never came up with strong set of conditions, you can say. Yes, we are helping a lot. We are helping in every available capacity for Afghanistan. But this time around, even Pakistan is different. Why? Pakistan is even testing waters with Taliban's government in Afghanistan, which is interim. Whenever I ask a question from Zabiullah Mujahid, he comes up with a response that we are an interim setup right now, Sumaira, and we are working in the direction. And when there is a permanent setup, why Pakistan is not believing? Because even in the 90s, they used to say, we are an interim setup in Afghanistan, and they did not come up with the international requirements. But this time around, it is totally, it's a game changer policy even from the international community towards Taliban, and Taliban know that. If they don't do this according to their wish and whim, they are going to collapse badly. And if someone sees or thinks that
And the
this
repercussions of which
almost
that collapse
$10
are going to be
billion.
borne by the Afghans themselves again. Dr. Nazir, what do you think? What could be the bargaining chip for the Taliban at this time if they want to act from a position of strength on the negotiating table in the Oslo talks?
First of all, they don't have a position of strength other than the occupation of Afghanistan. They control, they have captured the whole of Afghanistan. That is the only position that they have. The signals that they could send, I spoke earlier also, that there were certain things that they could have easily done. For example, after coming to power in the past 6 months, what they have done, the negative things that they have done, they have eliminated the Ministry for Women Affairs. There was no need to abolish that ministry. Then restrictions on girls' education, there was no need to do that. Restrictions on women on appearing on TV, for example. These are minor things. We are living in the 21st century. They cannot hide. Nobody can hide behind culture, certain culture now. There is a United Nations Declaration of Human Rights signed in 1948. There are 200 countries in the world, and they are supposed to follow that. I cannot hide behind my culture and say that I am not going to obey the human rights which are due to women, and say that no, my culture is like that. And this is not a new story. When I say that, give them time, this is not a new story. This has been going on for at least 40 years, from 1980. What were Taliban doing? Mujahideen doing? Mujahideen were the earlier incarnation of the Taliban. They were also trying to set the clock back. Taliban are also trying to set the clock back. In 21st century, you cannot set up a system which is 1,000-year-old. We need to understand that, and Pakistan also needs to understand that. And of course, their money should be released. There is no doubt about that. America should release their money. Western powers should also help them. There should be some positive sign. We cannot live millions of people die like that. But I repeat that, just blaming the world community, because world community, if we talk about just Western power, what did the Muslim countries do? We invited OIC 55 countries. No concrete major help came apart from a couple of $100.
But a humanitarian fund was created, and the food security program was
but that
launched.
this is peanuts. This is minor. Had that been substantial, probably they would not be asking for help from Western countries, because Western countries, these are the same powers
But the
that were
significance
enemies.
of that move could have been symbolic as well, in order to urge and show the international community that this bloc is actually going to help Afghanistan, but that might be meager when it comes to resources or the amount. But it's the international community, and especially the Western powers, that should come in to help Afghanistan?
Yes, the help should come. There is no doubt about that. The help should come. World community should help. We cannot let the people die. But at the same time, we should also say that the Taliban need to change their worldview.
So, Mr. Danjua, what do you think? Is there any bargaining chip at the hands of the Taliban, especially when it comes to Oslo talks they are having right now as we speak?
They don't really have a lot of leverage at this particular time because they are at the receiving end. They need the money. They don't have, but knowing, again, as I said, you have to understand the beast, the nature of the beast. They're the kind of people, they have been living in these rugged conditions, and these warlords, they've been living in caves for the last 40 years, if you say. And historically, this is a nation that has been accustomed to living like that. So if you think you can change them and force them to do something, the Americans and the NATO allies were there inside Afghanistan for 20 years, and they couldn't change them.
The global dynamics are changing very rapidly. The world stands at the edge of the fourth industrial revolution, and at the same time, you're of the view that Taliban or the people living in Afghanistan have that ancient understanding of life and the way they want to live it.
I very strongly believe that the Taliban should, the Afghans, not Taliban, let's talk about the Afghans. The Afghans should transform and become part of the globalization or the industrial revolution. This is all what we want. However, having said that, there are limitations that we have to live with. Now, right now, we can't install a puppet government there which is paratrooped into Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we have to live with this Afghan government. We can't let the people start. So, whatever the situation is, we have to live in those
Brigadier Jagi, why won't Afghans want their children to have the best modern education, not the best hospitalization facilities and all that glamour and glitter that comes with development prosperity?
I think this is the right of the Afghan people, what you have talked about. It is important for the world, and as the Prime Minister has rightly pointed out, that it is the time to stay engaged with Afghan leaders, to economically support them. And I, as have said before, now you see 40 years of war. We don't give it any consideration while talking of human rights, while talking of economic difficulties, while talking of Afghan people, Afghan culture has to change. There is no doubt in that. I don't say that they should live in the 16th century culture. They will. You see, in Pakistan, before 90, there was no motorway. There was no culture of seatbelt tying up. There was no culture of driving the vehicle at 125 kilometers per hour. But it is the motorway which has brought to that discipline. So that is what I say, that this Oslo talk is a very good opportunity where the leading countries representative will sit with them, talk with them, and give them the capacity to bring prosperity in Afghanistan. Moreover,
so Brigadier Jagi, do you think, unfortunately, we are short of time, very briefly and quickly, would you give your view, does these Oslo talks happen to be the precursor of the recognition or the legitimization of the Taliban government in Afghanistan?
I don't think that this will lead to the recognition immediately. But at the moment, even if they are able to get into a compromised solution of releasing the money, American about $9 million. Second, the world aid which is stuck up for the Afghan from different countries, and the human rights, education, and the women's empowerment. If some compromise solution do come up while keeping in view the Afghan culture, while keeping in view the Western values, It had to be a compromise between the two.
It
Both
has to be a
can't
compromise.
stand
So,
on the
Sumaira,
hard stance,
Brigadier Jagir, your point is well taken. Sumaira, do you think this round of talks in Oslo that is happening as we speak is going to be a precursor for the recognition of the Taliban setup there?
I think it can be termed as a beginning point. It can be termed as a starting point. The gun has fired its shot, and they are in the run now. And there, I would respectfully, I would disagree with the previous comment that OIC did not come up with the except for a few $100s. No, it's not. We have to see a long-term impact of OIC because there was no IC before this OIC. Nobody was even bothered
Okay,
to
Sumaira, your point
gather
is well
all these
taken. Thank you very
representatives
much
from
for
Kuwait.
being the part of Perspective today. I'm thankful to all the participants joining me at Perspective today, Mr. Yasir Janjua, Defense Analyst, and Dr. Nazir Mahmood, Foreign Affairs Expert, joining me in the studio, and Brigadier Retired Shahid Jagir, Defense Analyst, and Ms. Sumaira Khan, Journalist. Thank you all for joining in at Perspective. Until the next episode, it's goodbye for now.